Aloha, everybody. I'm Eva Andrade, and on this episode of Faith in Politics, we are going to be talking to Eric Buer of Gateways to Better Education. We're going to talk about parents' responsibility, and maybe is there a way that you can plug in to get your voice heard and understand what your rights are? And of course, you want to meet my beautiful co-host, Susan Duffy, and we're going to launch right in. So let's chat about that. Did you ever try to pit your parents against each other? My parents spent a lot of time talking to each other, so I never tried that because I knew if I did, I'd get in trouble for lying. Telling the truth was extremely important to my father. Telling an untruth was something that was not tolerated, and my dad would remind us that our words define our character. If we picked up a reputation as a liar, he told us it would take us years to rebuild our trust, if at all. 1 John 3:18 says, "Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." This tells me that just speaking isn't enough. We have to live what we say. We cannot be hypocrites in what we say or what we do. I'm not that old, but I find it very hard to believe that even in a strict fact like 1 + 1 = 2 is questioned today. We seem to get sucked up into the vortex of why is 1 + 1 = 2. You know, when a surgeon is operating on you, he or she doesn't pour a cup of coffee and discuss why you are there with the operating team. They fix the problem. It seems to me that this is one of the biggest problems we face today. People in leadership are trying to find out the why in the middle of a crisis. Sometimes you have to stop the bleeding before you take an inventory of the people in the waiting room. Word salads are becoming the dish of the day. Eloquent speech that ultimately shuts down one side of the debate because they deem themselves far more worthy than you. A friend recently reminded me that our lives become our greatest witness. As Christians, or even just people of goodwill, we brush off our pride and we dress ourselves in strength, humility, and truth. In doing this, we become far greater in the pursuit of justice. And that's my thoughts for this week. Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Faith in Politics. And today we've got a really exciting show for you as we are going to be talking with Eric Buer from Gateways to Better Education. And we're going to talk about why it's important for parents to plug into what's happening at their schools. And how do you do that, especially in today's world where there's so much confusion in the separation of church and state and what that is. And there's even Christians today that are afraid to bring their faith into the public square. And so we're going to turn over to Eric and maybe get some insights on how we can do that and what organization can help you. Welcome to the show today, Eric.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
All right. So we have our co-host, Susan Duffy, and we're very excited to have Susan with us because as we mentioned offline, Eric, she's done a lot of activism right here in the state of Hawaii on the curriculum and what's being taught in public schools. But I'm sure we have listeners and viewers that want to know a little bit more about Gateways to Better Education. What is that? Who are you? And why do you do what you do?
All right. Thank you. Well, we're an organization that's about equipping Christians in public schools. And we really, our name describes the people involved with us. It's the parents, the teachers, the administrators who are the gateways to better education. And so what we want to do is simply equip them with all that they can do to do two things: promote religious freedom in their schools and help students see the good that the Bible and Christianity have brought to the world. And so we empower teachers and parents to do that and advocate for that.
Yeah, when I'm going around doing our talks, when we're educating people, I always talk about the bookends of protection around our kids, right? We have the schools on one end and we've got parents on the other end. And if either one of those bookends is not correctly placed, then our children suffer. And I know one of the things that you've done, Eric, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about this, is this confusion that's out there about the separation of church and state and what is allowed in a public school. So why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, I find that there's kind of three views on the issue of separation of church and state. There's the ones that have the total separationist view, and that is our schools need to be hermetically sealed off from anything religious. And on the other hand, on the other extreme, you've got those who see what I call an evangelistic view, and that is teachers in the classroom seeing their opportunities to reach their kids for Christ. And that is a bridge too far as well. There are times and places, there are campus clubs, children's ministry clubs, and that sort of thing. When a teacher's off the clock, that's their own time, their own free speech. But when they're teaching, they can't be evangelizing in the classroom. And so you've got these two different views on the spectrum. But what really is perfectly legal and appropriate, and as I'll talk about in a few minutes, in Hawaii, academically expected, is to teach students about Christianity and the Bible and its impact on culture, and promote religious freedom among students. And so that's really that middle ground. I think a lot of people, and here's what I recommend. When somebody brings up the issue of separation of church and state, and they kind of just throw that down like it's a trump card that ends the conversation, you just ask the question, well, so let me understand this. Are you saying that if a church is on fire, they shouldn't call the fire department because that would be the state helping a religious organization? Churches should have their own fire departments. Or if a synagogue is vandalized, it should have its own police because you can't call the police for that. And well, no, I don't mean that kind of separation of church and state. Oh, okay. So it's not total separation. Well, what about the fact that it's in our curriculum? We're supposed to teach about various religions. Is that okay? Well, yeah, I'm not for censorship. Okay, that's good. Well, what about the fact that it's in our culture? Do we want to just exclude parts of our culture that we're not even going to allow students to express? Or, well, no, I think we should be more inclusive. All right. So what you do is you have a conversation and you help people think through and unpack what do they mean by separation of church and state? Because I agree, we certainly don't want the Church of America that, like the Church of England, and we don't want any clergy to have any kind of legislative authority over our elected officials. And likewise, we don't want our elected officials to have any ecclesiastical authority over our churches, which unfortunately is starting to happen these days with some of the legislation that's being proposed and some of the court rulings and so forth. So we need to be careful, but we don't want that kind of integration. We want a separation there. But when it comes to how you live your life and how you teach students and the things they need to know about culture, it's certainly not as hermetically sealed off and this wall of separation that everybody likes to talk about.
Eric, what do you see as the biggest reason that public school teachers are afraid to bring their faith into their classrooms?
Well, they just don't want trouble. I find teachers and administrators, their biggest issue is I don't want problems. And so I think what's important is to help them understand how to do it appropriately, lawfully, and actually meeting state expectations. I use the speed limit as an example. I don't know what the speed limit is there in Hawaii, but say it's 65 miles an hour. Then we're not asking you to go 80. We're not asking you to go 66. We want you to go the speed limit. But what I find is a lot of teachers and administrators are driving 30 on the freeway, or they're not even getting on the freeway because they're so afraid and they don't know what to do. And so it's simply understanding what the limits are and then being able to drive full throttle up to those limits. And that's what's really freeing for people. I'll give you an example. So we've done research on every state's academic standards where the Bible and Christianity can be included and are oftentimes expected to be included. And we'd be happy, by the way, to send your viewers, your listeners, our research on that for Hawaii. And they can go to our website, gogateways.org, and a little pop-up will come up and they can click on that, and then we will mail them your state's academic standards, our research on that regarding the Bible. For instance, in 8th grade, in their English classes, students are expected to analyze how a modern work of fiction draws on themes, patterns of events, or character types from myths, traditional stories, or religious works such as the Bible. So that means they'd have to read the Bible and biblical stories in order to understand how literature uses the Bible and references in the Bible to write novels and fiction. And so, when you talk about the Good Samaritan, well, who's a Good Samaritan? Why do we call them Samaritans? Well, here's the story of the Good Samaritan as told by Jesus. And perfectly legitimate. And in 8th grade, they're expected to do that in Hawaii. In the 9th and 10th grade, in your English programs, you're supposed to read Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. Wonderful, a wonderful document that he wrote. And he was thrown in jail for his protesting in Birmingham. And the clergy criticized him, saying, "You're a man of the cloth. How dare you do this? This is beneath the dignity of a man of the cloth." And so because he was writing to clergy, he wrote basically a Christian thesis on civil disobedience. And he starts out with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he goes right on through Scripture. He ends up with Calvary, and 3 men died on Calvary Hill. And to understand Reverend King's writings, students need to understand those biblical stories. And so it's perfectly legitimate when you're teaching, as you're fulfilling this standard for reading Martin Luther King's speech, his letter from a Birmingham jail, it's perfectly acceptable then to teach those biblical stories so they understand what he's referring to. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just curious, Eric. So this was specific to what Hawaii's doing in their public school system, but how do we compare to the rest of the nation?
Well, it's what they should be doing. Right. What we find, though, is a lot of teachers are scared to death to do that, and so they don't. And we just help them understand, hey, this is what you can do. And if you're going to do this sort of thing, put that standard, that academic standard at the bottom of the worksheet. So when it goes home and parents say, hey, why are you doing this? Oh, I see. You're fulfilling this standard. And, every state has their own academic standards. California's, believe it or not, are very robust. They're very multicultural. They teach all about all the different religions. But when it comes to teaching about the Bible and Christianity, they're expected to understand the gospel here in California. It actually says they're to understand Paul's message of salvation. This is right in their academic standards. It's not, something from the 1950s. And so there's much more there. We just pull back the curtain and say, look, you've thought all this time you couldn't do this stuff. It actually is there. You just need to be able to do it academically, not devotionally. And so that's what we help educators understand how they can do it.
That's so important. And I know that in about a minute or so, we're going to take a break and you're going to talk about your Free to Speak campaign, which is really good. But, before we do that, though, I'm really curious. Why do you think it is that some states teachers they're less afraid to do this? Is this because of knowledge that they just know they can get away? That because it's a red state, blue state, does that have anything to do with it?
Yeah, it oftentimes depends on the culture of the community. And if you've got parents who really think that somehow religion is an appropriate topic and they complain a lot, administrators don't want trouble, teachers don't want trouble. But we show them how to do this in a way that they can defend any parent, any teacher, any colleague, any administrator. And so it's really just a matter of building confidence. Because I find that a lot of teachers they want to talk about their faith in class, but they kind of bring it into a churchy mode. They kind of do things that are inappropriate, and then they don't think in terms of how does it intersect with my academic topic.
Eric, I have a question. Do you think that the teachers that are coming out of the teaching institutions are being made aware of the fact that they are capable of teaching in this way? Because, year after year, they're going to come out, right? They'll graduate from college, they'll graduate from these teachers' colleges, and then they'll go into the public school system, and they'll be completely unaware of this.
That's true. We have a university program that Christian universities use because they're obviously more motivated on this topic. We've trained over 20,000 student teachers. So we're a whole new generation of young people going into the profession, understanding what they can do. But yes, secular universities and their education departments, they don't teach these things. If anything, they would teach just the opposite, that you can't address all of this stuff. So
that's a really good point, Susan. And I think that one of the things that there are teachers out there that don't even know that if they do get in trouble and they've done it correctly, so they've done things the way they're supposed to, a lot of them don't even know that there's groups like the Alliance Defending Freedom that would represent them if they get in trouble. And so they tend to get nervous, about bringing their faith into the public square. So we're going to take a brief break. And when we come back, Eric's going to talk about this great campaign that Gateways to Better Education is doing called Free to Speak. And Susan may give you, Eric, a little headway on what we're dealing with here in Hawaii with the craziness that's happening. So for our viewers and listeners, you're listening on K-Light Radio and you're watching on Kalo TV. And please stay tuned because you don't want to miss what's coming up. We'll be right back.
Hi. My name is Susan Duffy, and I'm the president of the Pearson Foundation of Hawaii, located in downtown Honolulu. We exist to provide pregnancy resources for those women who find themselves with a difficult or an unplanned pregnancy. For more information about us, please visit us at our website. We really look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
We have a mission here at Kalo TV. We continue to be the only local, Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my gosh.
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The kalo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Kalo TV aims to bring much-needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. We're having a really good conversation with Eric Buer from Gateways to Better Education and my beautiful co-host, Susan Duffy. And we're going to jump right back into the craziness of what happens in the public school system and what teachers are free to do. And not just teachers. I think even students of faith are afraid to talk about their faith in the classroom. And so we've got Gateways to Better Education, who kind of helps parents understand. And Susan, why don't you just briefly let Eric know kind of what we dealt with here in Hawaii when it came to getting parents involved in what was happening in the public school system.
So Eric, we had this program called Pono Choices that was being implemented into the school system, and it was brought to the attention of legislators by a parent. And they weren't very transparent about that curriculum, and parents got involved to try to take a look at what was actually in there. And when we saw it, we discovered that it was pretty graphic, pretty sexually explicit, and it really wasn't for a lot of parents, and it was really hard to try to push back on that because nobody wants to be called a name and nobody wants to be intimidated, you know what I mean? So, but parents coalesced and teachers too. I have to say that there were teachers that they didn't really want to do that kind of thing. It's kind of anti-parent, anti-family type of program. So that's kind of what we were dealing with here.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because one of the things I noticed even with COVID, the lockdown, is parents had to start paying attention to what their kids were learning in the classroom because they could see it and hear it. Right.
I thought so too. I thought that was probably one of the benefits of it.
Right. And so with the Pono Choices, the same thing happened. Parents were suddenly made aware of what was happening in the public school system. And that's the important key point that I want you to talk about, Eric, is how important is it for parents to know what's happening in the classroom?
Absolutely essential. And, oftentimes when we raised 3 daughters in the public schools, and they come home and you say, how was school? And they go, fine. And you don't know what's actually happening in the classrooms. So we call it relational activism. There's a time and a place, of course, for political action, and a time and a place even for legal action. But what we try to help parents especially understand is, what do you do Monday through Friday in those relationships that God's given you? How do you help them see the light and see better things? And how do you discuss issues with them in those relationships? And you find in those one-on-one relationships, oftentimes teachers aren't as radical as they might appear, but they kind of go along to get along. And so sometimes those kinds of conversations can be helpful. Also, framing the issues, for instance, on sexuality and transgenderism and all of those sorts of things. Educators oftentimes, while they see themselves as defending the transgender or the sexually confused student, that sort of thing, they don't really think about the fact of how offensive and alienating it is for a student of faith, of many faiths. Mm-hmm. And so what they're really doing is creating a hostile environment within a classroom situation for students who come from more traditional faiths, whether it's Jewish, Muslim, Christian. And so now you've got these two ideas in conflict. Okay, I want to be inclusive of all students, but I'm not being inclusive of these traditional religious faiths families and the students there. They're feeling hostile environment. They're feeling alienated. And so when you bring that sort of thing out, it can help a teacher realize, okay, maybe I do need to pull back on some of this. Now, you're not going to have that success with those who are totally on board with making this new curriculum part of the school, but it can give people pause to think. And so it's by using those relationships that you can begin, hopefully, changing minds.
I love that. And I love the fact that what we saw with the issue on Pono Choices is that parents kind of do want to be involved. A lot of times they're busy, they're working jobs, they're trying to just keep their family strong. Right. And so they want to do it, but they don't know how, and they don't even know what their rights are. And so I love the idea of this Free to Speak campaign that you guys are doing there with Gateways. So why don't you share with us, like, why should parents want to know more? Yeah.
And we would love to see the Free to Speak campaign get launched in Hawaii. It's a unique strategy that frankly has never been done before in a public school environment. And that is identify the body of Christ within the public schools. Who are the Christians? Where are they? Parents, teachers, administrators, school board members. One of our operating principles is Christians permeate the system. We saturate the system, but oftentimes we don't know what to do. And so we don't do anything. And so let's first identify who are the Christians throughout this particular elementary school or this high school. And that's really a networking strategy. And then step 2 is you invite them all to a series of webinars that we do. And it's a 4-week series and 1 hour a week in the evenings where we train them, whether it's parents, teachers, administrators, on really what the law says, what they can do in their classrooms. We customize it for Hawaii. And then we target it to bring in the ministries that are already working on those schools. Love it. So we want to see all people get connected with others. So if you've got good news clubs for elementary students, if you've got Fellowship of Christian Athletes clubs in the high schools, if you've got Moms in Prayer group, Campus Crusade, Moms in Prayer, whatever they may be, we will actually highlight who the directors of those programs are in those schools and encourage people then to connect with them, because we want the body of Christ to come together for such a time as this. And then, so after that series of webinars, then we stay with them throughout the year with emails, suggestions. Hey, here are the holidays coming up. Here's what you can do for the holidays. We will do Zoom calls and talk about what's been going on. And then at the end of the year, we recommend churches locally do a Gateways celebration. since the people out in the schools are the gateways to better education, bring them together and have a celebration. And if your choir director did a great Christmas program and included traditional religious Christmas carols, don't take that for granted. Thank her and recognize her. And it's a place where other ministries can also connect with people. But then the preschool moms who don't know anything about the elementary school can connect with the moms who are already there. And same thing with the high school students. If you've got middle schoolers and those parents they're going into the high school and they don't know anything about the lay of the land of the high school, now you've got the body of Christ already in those high schools who can say, hey, let us show you who to connect with and what's been going on. And then they pass the torch on to them. So it's a wonderful way for the body of Christ to work together. And that's what the Free to Speak campaign does. And it promotes the U.S. Department of Education's guidance on students' religious freedoms. This guidance is very clear that students have the freedom to express their faith in class. They can write about it in their homework. They can talk about it with their friends. They can witness to their friends. And it also clarifies that teachers can teach all about religion. They can acknowledge the religious aspects of holidays and so forth. And so we promote that. We put, for instance, into a little pamphlet, the Free to Speak pamphlet. And it's not our opinions. We're just quoting from the Department of Education's guidance on students' religious freedoms. And we also curated videos out there that are promoting religious freedom. And for instance, here in California, the Orange County Department of Education has posted 2 really good videos on religious freedom, that one for teachers to show to their students. It's a 3-minute video they've provided that teachers can show to students that explains the federal guidance on students' religious freedoms. Hey, you can express your faith here in class. And then they've also provided another video for administrators to show faculty so that, because look, administrators don't want problems, as I've said. So if they show this in a staff meeting and say, look, your students have religious freedoms. We want to make sure we don't get sued. So therefore, let's watch this video, understand what the federal guidance is. I mean, that's great. And so we're pointing people to the Orange County Department of Education and say, look, this is a government agency that's providing these videos. Show them in class, show them in your staff meetings. It's a great way to promote free speech, particularly on the issue of religious speech in classrooms and in schools.
So how do we get one of those videos done for Hawaii?
Right.
No, it's generic.
Oh, it's generic.
I mean, it can be used anywhere in the country. Yeah, because it's talking about the federal guidance.
Okay.
So Hawaii, you could use it. You could use it right now.
Okay.
Was that something that your organization put together? That's your video?
It's if you go to our website, we link to the Orange County Department of Education. They're the ones who provided the video.
Give us that website again, and we'll put it on the bottom of the screen.
If you go to our website, is because they have a really long URL to get there, but our website, just go to gogateways.org and then /free to speak.
That's great.
So
and then you'll see all the different tools and so forth. And then that we have videos that we've just gone out on the internet and said, hey, where are videos that are good on this issue of religious freedom? And then we link to them. And so the Orange County Department of Eds are 2 of those videos.
This is really important information. So for our viewers and our listeners, if you need to have this information, not only so that you can be better armed, but that you can also encourage the teachers and the administration in your public school system, please make sure you go to this website and get this information, because I think that this is like a game changer for some parents and some teachers because they don't know about it.
It'll give them courage.
It'll give them courage. So we just have a couple of minutes left. And so we definitely want to thank you, Eric, for the good work that Gateways has been doing in the community. And now, Eric, you've been doing this for 20 years plus.
30. Actually, this year is our 30th anniversary. We started in 1991.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Well, good work. We give you a round of applause for that. That's all the good work. What about, you gave us your website address, which is really good. People, make sure that you reach out to Gateways for Better Education. Send an email to Eric if you have questions, specific questions. I'm sure he'd love to get information into your hand. Teachers, we are talking to you. if you are worried about what's happening in your classroom and you want to know what your rights are, go to this website and get more information.
And if you want our research on Hawaii's state academic standards regarding the Bible and Christianity, and you'll be surprised at how much they can learn, and it's official from the Hawaiian Department of Education, then go to our website. And like I said, when you go to the homepage, there'll be a little pop-up and it says your state academic standards. You click on that, and then we will mail you Hawaii's state academic standards regarding the Bible and Christianity.
All right. Well,
Great.
Eric, before we let you go, let's give you this last few seconds to maybe give some word of advice to some parents, some teachers, and maybe even some people that don't have kids in the public school system, why it's important for us to be paying attention to what's happening.
Oh, absolutely. This generation of K through 12 students is the next generation of adults in America, the voters, the ones who form culture. We have to engage in this. And if we simply say, oh, public schools are a waste of time, put them all in Christian schools and vouchers and that sort of, okay, those are all good strategies. But the fact of the matter is, the next generation of Americans are in the public schools. We cannot ignore it. We have to get involved in making a difference.
Amen. So we thank you, Eric, for your time today. We really enjoyed talking with you. And please stay on my speed dial, because I'm sure I'll be inviting you again to be on the show as we move forward. And for our viewers and listeners, you're watching on Kalo TV and you're listening on K-Light Radio. Parents, pay attention to what your kids are learning in school. Teachers, find out what your rights are, because you may have more rights than you think you have. And for those of you that don't have kids in school, as Eric said, these kids are going to be our elected officials. And so we want to make sure we know what they're doing as well. Stay plugged in. We will be right back.
Aloha, this is William Harrison, president of the Christian Legal Society of Hawaii. We're having this amazing event. It's a free webinar. It's going to feature two distinguished professors of law, Jonathan Turley as well as Michael McConnell. They will be speaking about religious freedom and First Amendment rights. We're going to be discussing some amazing cases that are before the U.S. Supreme Court that will affect your religious rights in our state. Please join us for this free event. Register online. We hope to see you there. Mahalo.
Aloha, Daniel and Lucy here with Kalo Outreach. Lucy, tell them what's coming up.
Yes, so on the second Saturday of July, we are having a celebration. We are celebrating all of our volunteers that have come out to help us, and we are going to celebrate all that God has done. So if you have come out to help us in Waimanalo, please join us on the second Saturday in July for a great celebration. We'll have food, we'll have some entertainment, and if you have not had a chance to come out to help us, please join us so that you can come and see all that God has done.
We can't wait to see you there. Aloha.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. You're visiting with me, Eva Andrade, the host, and my beautiful co-host today, Susan Duffy. It's just a pleasure to be with you today, Susan. And I know for some of you are going, when's Jim coming back? He's never coming back. I fired him. No, that's not true. Jim is on vacation for 2 weeks and he will be back. So stay tuned for that. But Susan, so we had this wonderful guest. Eric shared with us a lot of information about what Gateways is doing.
Awesome.
But I know for you personally, it's always been important for parents to be involved in what's happening on the campus level. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I think it's critical for parents to be involved. You know, a lot of this stuff that we're seeing now has been percolating behind the scenes for a long, long time, and we're just now seeing it. And I think we discussed earlier how when COVID happened, parents got a lot more involved. And so we're seeing a lot more parental involvement at school boards these days. And we're seeing a little bit of a more of a pushback from parents because they're finally seeing what's actually in the curriculum.
Oh my God. Isn't it interesting? You're watching the news and you see these parents at the school board meetings, like screaming at the school boards because they're seeing the curriculum, especially in regards to the critical race theory.
Right. And I think Eric had a good point. You know, it's relational because you automatically make this assumption that they know about this. And sometimes they don't know. They don't know what's what's in it, like say a sex ed curriculum. They may not know. They just know the title of it or whatever, right? They don't know. And they're not necessarily very, very liberal on the liberal end, right? They're just a teacher trying to do a really good job, but they need the parents' support too. They need the parents' involvement, I think.
Well, I always say that we have a couple of issues that we have to deal with here in Hawaii, right? We have a culture here where we're almost taught from small kid time, right? That you don't make waves.
Right.
You don't argue with authority. You kind of have this aloha and respect to people in authority. And so parents kind of feel like, oh, should I say something? What we're saying is they absolutely should say something.
Right. Because you have a lot of outside money that comes in to put a lot of these programs into the schools. It's not necessarily, coming from a grassroots effort, right? It's not the parents demanding this or that. It's some of these outside influence with money.
Oh, it was a very interesting point. So you know this, and maybe a lot of our listeners and viewers don't know this. How much money was poured into Pono Choices?
Pono Choices, $2 million a year, every year for 5 years. And that was just one program. And then they had the Making a Difference.
$2
million for just middle school. Just middle school kids.
And now for people that might be listening that don't know, I kind of remember this Pono Choices thing. And I know you kind of briefly told Eric about it, but why was Pono Choices? Because Pono Choices, for those that don't know, Hawaiian Pono normally means righteous or righteousness, right? So you would think a righteousness curriculum or one that would mean something positive. Why was it not positive?
Right. And it did look innocuous. I mean, it did look like, well, how could this be a bad thing? But when you actually looked at the teacher's guide, when you actually looked at what they were going to tell the kids, I mean, this whole sexual rights issue about teaching kids about their right to have pleasure, these kinds of things that are inappropriate at a middle school. That's my opinion. Middle school, you don't probably need to be talking about that, right? And so that's what got parents upset a little bit.
Do you know that when my youngest daughter was in the 5th grade, I believe, they sent a notice out to all the parents saying, we're going to be teaching sex ed. And so we're notifying you. And if you would like to come and view what we're going to be showing, please come down to the school so you can view it. Now, I'm thinking I didn't have that opportunity with my older daughter. I don't remember.
Right.
I'm sure there was a notice that went out, but I don't remember that. So what with my younger daughter, I thought I'd be the good parent, right? And I'm going to go down to the school and I'm going to view this. So I figure I better go early and get parking, right? So I get down there early and there's like no cars in the parking lot. And I'm thinking, gee, maybe I'm in the wrong place. Did I get the wrong date? I had the paperwork with me. I checked it. Nope, I'm in the right place. I'm at the right time. And I'm going, and a couple cars pulled in. So I thought, okay, this is good. So it was in the library of the school. So when I walk in there, do you know there were only 2 other parents that came to view? Now, this is public school here in Hawaii. So there were 3 sets of parents that were there. So they began to kind of, we got to look through all the books and all that kind of stuff. As soon as I saw the books, I realized that I wanted to have these discussions with my daughter. And I personally didn't like some of the stuff that was in there. So I kind of already had made up my mind that I was going to opt my daughter out. But I thought I'm still going to be fair and I'm still going to watch the whole thing. Well, we were maybe half an hour into the program and one set of parents said, oh, we're fine with this. We're good. So it was just me and a father that was there, that was left. His wife had to work, so he was there. And there were videos. Okay, this is back in the days of videos. And so what the librarian said is, look, we can't show you the whole curriculum because that would be too long. So what I'm going to do is just kind of fast forward this videotape and stop it every once in a while so you can kind of see what it is. And so there were a couple of things that showed up on this videotape and I'm like, absolutely not. Am I going to subject my daughter to this? And so, me and that father sat through the end of the program. So when the actual class came and my daughter was she came home that day and she said, Mom, thank you so much for opting me out. She goes, because she was taking her and the other little kid that was also opted out because the father, I guess, didn't like the program. They were sent to the library and got to do some study work and they had some stuff they had to do. But she said when she got back to the rest of her classroom, she said the other girls were so uncomfortable and embarrassed. And so she was kind of glad that she didn't have to go through that. She's older now and thinks she could have handled it. But, I think parents need to take this very serious. They just got to know what it is their kids are learning.
Right.
And I think that that's why parents are rising up they're just so upset about the critical race theory. So let's take a quick break and watch a video by Chris Rufo about what's happening with critical race theory. And when we come back, we'll talk and share our thoughts about that.
Sounds
Critical
good.
race theory is an ideology that presents American history as a sequence of oppressions. It divides the country into oppressor and oppressed based on racial categories. It's something that is deeply alarming. It casts a revisionist and very pessimistic, even fatalistic cast on all of America's history, dividing students, dividing teachers, and dividing communities, all with taxpayer dollars. The danger of critical race theory is that if it is implemented in schools, it will divide children from one another, it will divide children from their families, it will divide different groups based on constellation of identity categories from one another. It's a solvent ideology. It's something that dissolves human bonds, it dissolves social trust, it dissolves people's sense of agency and confidence and possibility. There's really two ways to go in public education. You either strive for academic excellence that challenges students of all backgrounds to achieve to the highest of their potential, or you strive for a regime of critical race theory or equity, which seeks to level any sense of achievement or excellence. It seeks to reduce students' opportunities, reduce individual potential into an undifferentiated but nominally equal mass. Listen, the world is a competitive place. We need our kids striving to fulfill their academic potential, not pulling them down into a toxic, divisive, and fatalistic abyss of critical race theory. To ensure that their kids aren't being taught the principles of critical race theory, parents need to get involved. They need to demand from their teachers and principals and school boards a copy of all the curriculum and teaching materials to find out exactly what's happening in the classroom. Public education is decentralized across thousands of different districts and tens of thousands of different schools. It requires the participation of parents at the local level to be informed, to rally a group together of other families and parents, and then to push back in a way that will make a difference.
We really want to thank Christopher Rufo for all the good work he's doing on critical race theory. And I really appreciated this video, Susan, because it was brief, but it kind of, again, shows the importance of why parents need to be involved. I'd like to get your thoughts with this whole critical race theory. Why do you think that there's so much, people that are confused about it?
I've asked myself the same question, like why all of a sudden? Because, years ago when we were working on CSE, comprehensive sex education, and parents were upset about that, I think that parents really didn't know what was going on. Now CRT is in the news and everybody's talking about it because it's so uncomfortable. It's so divisive in the classroom. And I can't imagine why are we doing this? Why is this such a big thing to teach little kids, right? That if you're white, that you're somehow privileged over everybody else. And I see in Hawaii, I think, well, this is such a unique place. It's such a beautiful place. It's, there's strong families, faith, culture, right? How could that possibly take root here? But I've heard that it's here. I don't know. Do you know? Have you heard anything about?
No, and I think you yourself went through the process of trying to find curriculum and what's taught or whatever, and you were sharing with me how it was in a weird place.
Yes, it was in a really weird place. So, if you go to the Department of Education's website, you say you want to look at sex ed, CSE, 7 programs listed. So I went there the other day and I look at it and the 7 are there. And then underneath it, now you have preventing sexual and interpersonal violence, something like that. And then you have those same CSE programs that are listed up at the top. They're now underneath on the bottom. But I'll tell you something really interesting. I went to the SIECUS website, Sex Information and Education Council of the United States, because they do state profiles. Because there are other people looking at our state telling us what we need to teach the kids, right? And they were not happy with Hawaii because Hawaii sex education is a very low priority, which is great. Yay, right? It's not a priority. Then they're urging their activists, you need to get involved. So they're never going to stop trying to push stuff into the school system, what they want, what their agenda is, right? So that's why parents need to be involved, I think.
Well, I tell you what I hear all the time from parents. I get emails, I get phone calls because of what we do in Hawaii Family Forum. And here's what parents want. Parents want historical facts taught in school. Does the United States have some bad things in our history? Absolutely. we should talk about it. We should talk about the fact that we've had slavery. We should talk about the fact that even Irish immigrants were treated very poorly when they came to the United States. How about the Native Americans?
Right.
You know, they were treated very poorly. Here in Hawaii, what about the Native Hawaiians?
Right.
I think that parents want accuracy and facts. But what I'm also hearing from parents is, why is history being rewritten though? You know,
Right.
why now are we questioning, you know, what the facts say about the Holocaust or what they say about slavery here in the United States? I had a parent that was really upset that, you know, somewhere on the mainland, they're talking about taking down the statue of President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, because of, you know, the whole issue of slavery.
Right.
And I'm thinking, wait a second, isn't this the president that helped outlaw slavery in the United States? Was President Lincoln a perfect man? Probably not. As Christians, we believe there was only one perfect man, and that was Christ Jesus.
Right.
So if we're going to look for perfection, then I think that we need to get out of the business altogether, because there isn't going to be perfection. But why are we not teaching facts anymore and history the way that it actually happened? Why is that?
Because we have a segment of people that are pushing an ideology, right? Abraham Lincoln is part of our culture. President George Washington is part of our culture, right? You want to, and they want to erase all of that and create something new. That's Marxist.
What's sad is, growing up here in Hawaii, we were really taught not to look at ethnicities, right? Because here in Hawaii, we're a melting pot. Not that ethnicities don't exist and there aren't pockets of people, you know, that have issues, because discrimination does exist.
Right.
Again, we're not trying to make this a situation that is not there. But at the same time, suddenly now I'm feeling all of my ethnicities, because I am a Heinz 57 people. I've got all kinds of ethnicities in here. And we have the DNA test to prove it. So I don't know which one I'm supposed to identify with, you know, based on what I'm being told today. What am I supposed to be proud of? And what am I supposed to be ashamed of? You know, what is the message that's being taught to our kids? How about the message of that every kid is created in the image and likeness of God? How about every kid is special, regardless of what they look like on the outside? I don't care whether a kid is in a wheelchair or not, or whether a kid has curly hair or straight hair, brown eyes, blue eyes, dark skin.
And I think that's why that video of that father with the little girl named Royalty went viral, right? Because she was saying the same thing. You could be their friend. You know, and he's going to tell his little girl, you can grow up and be whatever you want to be, right? Because actually that's the bottom line, right? We're all children of God, you know?
And that's the message that we want to keep putting out here in Faith in Politics, is that the foundation of everything we do is based on the biblical principles, and we're never going to change. You're listening on K-Light Radio and you're watching on Kalo TV, and we'll be right back to continue the discussion on education and parents' responsibilities. We'll be right back.
We have a mission here at Kalo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my gosh.
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The Kalo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Kalo TV aims to bring much needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Aloha, Daniel and Lucy here with Kahlo Outreach. Lucy, tell them what's coming up.
Yes, so on the second Saturday of July, we are having a celebration. We are celebrating all of our volunteers that have come out to help us, and we are going to celebrate all that God has done. So if you have come out to help us in Waimanalo, please join us on the second Saturday in July for a great celebration. We'll have food, we'll have some entertainment, and if you have not had a chance to come out to help us, please join us so that you can come and see all that God has done.
We can't wait to see you there. Aloha.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. You're watching on Kahlo TV and you're listening on K-Light Radio. Oh, Susan, we have just, again, we do this every show. We have only scratched the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
But you were going to share a thought you had. And
yes, I was going to tell you, I said, I think one of the things that I'm seeing most around the country that's happening right now is parents at school boards. And somebody told me about Washougal, Washington the other day, where these parents, they went to the school board meeting and they shut them out. And I couldn't believe it. And so then they shut them out and the parents got mad and she took some white chalk apparently and wrote, this is illegal. Because they were going to talk about the masks, for their kids and stuff. And so then they all left. And then the school board opened up the meeting again without them. And then they got word of it and went back, right? And then you had that big brouhaha in Loudoun County.
Yes.
I mean, it's really incredible how parents are really becoming more involved.
Oh, and I love it because when you're watching all of these great things happening across the nation, the parents come up to the mic and you can tell they're a little nervous, right?
They are.
And they're like, I've never done this before, but, this really upsets me.
Right.
And I mean, we saw an arrest happen in one of the states because a father got so upset at what's being taught. And, it's simply going back to parents knowing what's being taught in the schools. And the minute they see that, and this is the thing, the public school system, it belongs to the public.
Right.
We have a right. Yes, we do. Just like the atheists have a right to stand up and say, we don't like this being taught, just like this ethnic group or this religious group has a right to stand up and say, parents have a right. In fact, parents, because it's their kids that are being affected, have the biggest right to say what's being taught. Now, Susan, do you have any advice? Because, looking back on Hawaii's history, right? Do you remember when they tried to pass that bill for homeschoolers?
Oh, to limit homeschooling? To limit homeschooling. Yes.
Do you remember how many parents showed up at the Capitol? Lots.
Yeah.
Lots. And in fact, there were so many parents that showed up at the Hawaii State Capitol that even the legislators were like, okay, we better not do this. This is not a good idea.
Just shows the importance of networking, being connected with what's going on in the legislature. And then also, I think for parents just to be involved with their child's school, get to know the teacher, get to know the superintendent, know the principal, like he said, have that relationship with them. So you'll know what's going on if you have that, right? I think that's the best advice that I would give any parent, because the teachers want to do a good job. They love the kids, right? They have a lot on their plate. Right.
I say that even with pastors, right? If you hear a pastor give a really good sermon, you go up to him after and you say, great job, pastor, because pastors hear a lot when people don't like something, right? They complain, they send letters. And the same thing works for the school system.
I think so too.
I think that parents need to also let their teachers know when they're doing a great job.
Yeah, appreciate that. And pray for the school.
And pray for the school. In fact, there are a lot of groups right here in Hawaii that encourage that.
Right.
If you're one of those people and you're like, look, I want to pray for my public school. How do I do it? Send me an email at eva@kahlotv.com and I'll plug you into some different groups because there are some different groups out there. But Susan, there is a group of people we're missing here. And I'd love you to give a shout out to them. Give a shout out to the homeschoolers that are out there doing great work with their kids.
Oh, great work, homeschoolers. You're doing an awesome job. And actually, I think it's growing now, too, because of, of what happened during COVID and the shutdown and stuff like that. And people having to make decisions about, online schooling. Can I put my kid in a school and then do a little bit of online or, so homeschooling, I think, is increasing a lot.
Well, my co-host next week is going to be Ola Souza, and I'm going to have her share a little bit about her son that she's found a great thing about homeschooling him or keeping him at home. And I think she's going to continue to do that. So we'll kind of keep that conversation
And
going.
homeschooling is not like a Zoom class. It's something different. It's not online. It's just, it's kind of like a lifestyle.
Well,
right?
yeah, because what it does is it really connects the parent and their child in a way that should actually be happening. It is the parent's first and foremost responsibility to be the first and foremost educator of their child.
Right.
Parents shouldn't think that the schools are going to do all things,
right?
Because that's just not going to happen. And if you do step back and let the school be that primary source, God knows what the outcome is going to be for your child. So that's our message for today is really parents and teachers, they have a responsibility and a duty to know what's going on and then plug in and stay plugged in.
Absolutely.
So, Susan, as we wrap up today, first, I just want to thank you for all the good work you've done here in the state of Hawaii of notifying parents and working with a couple of our state legislators on what's going on in the public schools. So good job. Thank you for that. Any lessons learned?
Well, yeah, a lot of lessons learned on that thing. It's interesting how the legislature works and, how they have to listen to all of their constituents, things like that. So a lot of lessons learned. But we didn't know then what we know today about that program. And so today you can find a lot of information on it. Parents have easy access to see what's in those programs. We didn't have that then. Hawaii was really on the forefront of that effort.
And we hope to keep Hawaii on the forefront. And in order to do that, we've got to keep Faith in Politics on the air. And the only way we can do that is if viewers and listeners like you plug in and support this program. And you can do that by contacting kalotv.com and making a donation to make this program continue. Listeners and viewers, we just give a shout out to you. And we thank you for always taking the time on Fridays to share your time with us and let us share our time with you. And we want to continue to make that happen. So stay plugged in. I want to give a couple of shout outs. First of all, thanks, Susan, for being co-host today. Thank you
for
Susan.
inviting me.
It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. And I'm sure you'll be back for other things. And for those of you that may think that Susan looks a little familiar, she does run the Pregnancy Center on Pearson Place.
Correct.
So you want to look for Pearson Place. What's that address if people want to look
1145 Bishop Street in downtown Honolulu.
And your website?
PearsonPlace.org.
Okay, so check it out and make sure you know what they do because Susan wears many hats and that's one of them. I want to thank April Wilson, who always plugs in on Friday and during the show, she's chatting and we're chatting back with her. So thank you, April. We really appreciate your manao. And as always, we want to end with thanking Kalo TV and K-Light Radio for their great programming. Both Kalo TV and K-Light Radio has programming that you do not want to miss. Kalo TV's got speakers and pastors that are going to enrich your life. And so make sure that you check out Kalo TV. If you're listening on K-Light Radio, check out Kalo TV and check out their programming. You're not going to be disappointed. If you're watching on Kalo TV, check out K-Light Radio and the great programming that they have. They've got speakers and pastors that could change your life because of the message that they do. So make sure you plug into these great ministries, people. You're not going to regret it. And as always, tune in every Friday to Faith in Politics because we want to be your voice. And make that donation to kalotv.com so that we can stay on the air. And next week, join us as my co-host Ola Souza and I talk about the police reform here in Hawaii, what's happening, what's not happening. And you don't want to miss that because you're going to have two Portuguese in front of the mic. So stay tuned and we will see you next week at K-Light Radio, Kalo TV, 10 a.m. on Fridays. Mahalo, everybody. Thanks for listening.